Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome everybody to Red Hot Talk once again. As you can see, today is me alone because Rod is out doing something that he enjoys at the moment. So he's having a day off. So I'm going to take over for today's chat. But it's going to be interesting because most of you know that I am a portrait photographer by profession. So I do this day in, day out. And so I can say a thing or two about trends in the portraiture. Right. Things has moved on quite a bit and seems to be kind of going around in circle over the past 20, 30 years. Most of you who shoot portrait or you like portraits would probably seen the same changes over the years as well. So today I want to utilize this opportunity to highlight some of the latest trend and also kind of also blend in a little bit with the gear talk because something that I noticed that a lot of these changes and the trends are actually initiated by the recent revival of compact point and shoot cameras. Right, so something that I actually do notice that since about 2 years ago, and this has a direct influence to what we're about to talk about today. I'm going to show you some sample images, some portrait work that I've done over the past few years, and then you can also see what I'm about to talk about as well. So hopefully this is going to be maybe educational, at the same time hopefully a bit of entertainment as well. But please do share your thoughts about what I'm about to say. Once you hear something, if you do have any questions or anything like that, please do feel free to write on the chat room here and we can talk about it together. So without further ado, let's get it started. And so I've got a couple of people here, this side to a screen, regular, and Yumi as well. So welcome back here. So I just want to see what you have said here. Baking homemade lemon squares and watching a perfect autumn morning. Ooh, lemon square sounds yummy. I do like lemon, and you know that one of my favorite colors is actually yellow as well. So lemon square seems to fit the bill quite nicely. Okay, so let's start off with the overall trend in the past 10 years, right? When we talk about portrait, when you see YouTube videos talking about portrait lenses, they will talk about one thing most of the time, or one of the things that most people talk about when it comes to portraiture and portrait lens reviews is bokeh, right? As seen the thumbnail, no more bokeh. This is exactly what the new trend is. So many people like to shoot portrait who buy this sort of portrait lenses like 85, 90, 135 or even 200 millimeters lenses are looking for one thing: subject separation, good subject separation with really creamy bokeh, whatnot. So a lot of people think that this is, the way to go into portraiture. To some extent, yes, this trend has been around for, since the early 2000s, and it's been, literally around since about, I think, from between 2000 to about 2015. So it's been a while, this trend. So what I mean is people shoot a lot of these portrait lenses in almost wide open all the time. If you got an 85 1.4, you shoot either 1.4 or 1.8. And if you got a 135 f2, you might actually shoot it f2 or even like 2.8 or 3.5. So you really want to create that punchy 3D pop separations from between the subject and the background, right? This is, I've done that many times myself, because it's actually cool, it's trendy. If people like that sort of photographs, you gotta have to give it to the clients, right? The client loves it, you gotta do it. But at the same time, and you just have to realize that, like deep down, is this type of photography is what you want? Personally, I actually don't like shallow depth of field photo that much. I do it just to have enough effect to separate the subject and the background. What I don't like is to basically open up so wide that you can't possibly recognize the background. And this is something that I believe many portrait photographers, since the, like I said, early 2000 to about 2015 or so, were deliberately doing that. I've seen so many photographs now. In fact, you might have seen my latest video, the Laowa 200mm f2 review yesterday. At the same time, you see a lot of the similar reviews by other portrait photographers, you would notice one thing and one thing only: shallow depth of field. This sort of look is, to me, is a little bit outdated now, and then they do it only for demonstration purposes. I totally understand that, but you can see the degree of subject separation is there. Once you shoot wide open with this lens, 200 at f2, you can literally throw everything behind the subject blurred, completely out of focus. So it just really something, in terms of depth of field. But do you really want that? I think that depends on the context of the portrait photography. But at the same time, I would say that all the time, if you're doing portrait work, for instance, and the best thing to do is to blend in with the background, because with having the background in the back, it gives you texture, give you a little bit of something to create a story, to create the aesthetic, so to speak. Because when you throw the background out completely, what it just blobs everywhere. You're not going to be pretty, like you may have a very pretty subjects here, but you can't see anything in the back. It can't complement whatever he or she is wearing, or the overall outfit and everything like that. So I always like to blend in a little bit of the background by stopping the lens down as much as I can, while still maintaining some sort of separations, not completely blow them up altogether. However, this was the trend. Like I said, this was the trend between early 2000 to 2015, but things has changed, fortunately, because of the recent popularity gain from point and shoot camera, right? So Rod and I had talked about the rise of point and shoot in the last couple of years. In fact, you might actually heard of rumors that Panasonic Lumix is about to launch the LX100 replacement, right? This is a rumor. Don't quote me on anything. It is a rumor nonetheless, because of the resurgence of point and shoot cameras. So now manufacturers are scratching their head out, thinking that when and how we can introduce a brand new point and shoot camera in 2025 or 26. They can't just throw a camera out, just like that. You can't. You have to restart the manufacturing line, even if you want to reintroduce an old model, for instance. It's not that easy. So at the moment, young photographers, young trendy photographers are looking for second-hand point and shoot cameras, looking at a lot of these premium compact cameras, and everything they can get hold of, right? For one reason, it's not just about the trend. It's actually, from what I understand, is the aesthetic coming from these little cameras. Right? And many of you know that a lot of the digital point and shoot cameras have one thing in common, which is their tiny sensor. And what does tiny sensor give you? A lot of noise? Yeah, sure. And also, very deep depth of field, right? And this is the aesthetic they're really going for now, because they think that this really reminiscent of the old kind of like film days, during the film days, the point and shoot cameras, because remember back in the old days, a lot of the film cameras started with f3.5 and f4 aperture. So in 35mm terms, if you're shooting a 28mm lens or 35mm lens with that sort of aperture, you are getting quite a deep depth of field. So you're not actually getting any kind of subject separation. So they are really kind of into that kind of look now, and that has influenced a lot of the fashion worlds, in the trends and everything, magazines, for instance. They are all now looking for the aesthetic simply because people like them. So because of that, commercial photographers are starting to adapt or change once again back to the deep depth of field look. So they no longer want to throw everything out now. They don't want to open up 1.4, 1.2 f1 aperture to shoot everything. No, they don't want that now. They actually want the opposite. They want to include everything. And in my eyes, that is actually the best way forward. Because a lot of people, if they started photography since the 2000 era, would notice one thing, when people talk about portrait work, get a portrait lens, shoot wide open, you throw the background out, you get subject separation, you want to see bokeh, you want to see bokeh as much as you can, right? No, that's the wrong approach, right? You only do that if you really have some distraction at the back. You don't want people to see. In my eyes anyway, because otherwise you must just shoot in a studio. Why bother shooting outdoor anyway, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is, aperture really ultimately is for light gathering. If you don't need the light, why should wide open? You know, a lot of the older SLR, DSLR can't even reach the shutter speed that we have in today's mirrorless camera with electronic shutter, for instance. So that means that people used to do with the DSLRs back in the early 2000s with these sort of fast lenses, we have to use ND filters. Many of them do, because you know you're shooting bright sunny day with a 1.4 aperture. You know, most of the DSLR would top out 1/8,000 seconds. The pro level DSLRs, you know, even the consumer level DSLR would be 1/4,000. So with that sort of shutter speed, you can't even compensate the amount of light going in. So you have to use an ND filter to cut the light down quite dramatically. You either use an ND32, sometime in some cases can be 64. So it is actually quite intense. So things have obviously moved on quite a bit since the mirrorless introduction, because now we can shoot electronic shutter, you know, with much faster aperture, 1/25,000, which is a much faster shutter speed, so you can compensate that with that sort of bright aperture. But like I said, things has changed now. Things has moved back to the original, which I personally really much fond with, because involving background is an art. Right? For people into portraiture, even in photography in general, would understand that and will appreciate the usefulness and the importance of background. You know, you can't have no background, right? You know, if you shoot portrait having wide open aperture all the time, you essentially disregard the background, right? And to me, background is also an element of photography. You need to have the depth. You need to have, you know, the foreground, the background to create the interest for the subject, right? So this is something that not many people have talked about. Not many people really pay too much attention when it comes to portrait photography, simply because of the how social media has presented portrait photography over the past 15 years. So this is something that I am professional, so I mean, I'm talking really just from my experience and from what I can see, what my client likes and not like, to talk about today's subject. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And so before I show you some sample images, I just want to reflect some of your comments. I can see quite a few has popping up already. Quite a few people has joined in. Hello, Wilma. Hello, Anthony. And quiet photographer. Hope you're not that quiet. You're typing out. That's good. That's good. So let's go through some comments one by one, and we're gonna have a little chat about portrait wear, what your views are about shallow depth of field photography. So Anthony, when I do portraits, I like to use the 45 1.8. Hardly do any portrait these days, mostly concentrating on landscape and wildlife photography. Right. It's interesting because I use my 45 a lot. You know, at the early days of Olympus, I used the 45 1.8. Like almost exclusively for a lot of my portrait work, until they introduced the 1.2 version that I moved on to the 1.2. Not for the Bokeh ball, because of what I just talked about. It's actually for light gathering and also for the weather sealing, because the 45 1.8 wasn't weather sealed, and many of you know that I shoot outdoor a lot, so I need a lens that is rugged. So that's why I went for the 1.2 version. And a lot of the time, I actually stopped down to 1.8 to shoot with that lens as well. So it's not something that I mentioned about subject separation, bokeh ball, and things like that. But at the same time, Micro Four Thirds, one main advantage of Micro Four Thirds is the inherent deeper depth of field look that we have, right? So even when we shoot at 1.2, for instance, with the 45 millimeter lens, you got to gain the equivalent kind of depth of field look in a full frame world as like 2.4. So it's actually not as shallow as you may think, but that's good. That works for me, and I really like that kind of look. So that's why I think the Micro Four Thirds portrait work that I've done is by far the best so far. Otherwise, I have to stop down full frame lenses, which I have been doing for the past 2 years. So people just probably wonder always why your photography looks a bit different. And the fact is, a lot of my photography for the past 20 years is always kind of similar kind of look, similar sort of presentation. And like I said already, I don't like to throw everything out in the background. So people, when people talk about portrait or show people portrait work, and they say, "Oh, Jimmy's photograph is a little bit different to others because others are having ultra shallow depth of field while mine aren't," and that I'm kind of going against the flow. I'm sticking my gun there. I just don't want to throw everything out in the background, because I like to involve them as much as I can. And let's look at this one here. And oh, thank you very much. Yes, thumbs up and help boost this live stream. That would be amazing. Thank you very much for that. I did high school photo shoot. The client wanted a blown out, washed out background, and I was like, okay, it was so against my feeling, but it worked for them. Yeah, I got to say, like if a client really wants it, if you're a commercial photographer, a profession, you earn your money from photography, you gotta do and deliver what the client wants, right? Like I said, I have done shallow depth of field photography for a number of my clients because they specifically asking me to do that. If they give me the complete 100% creative license, I would do what I want, and I would just simply won't do that. But yeah, you got to make your money. So, I won't blame you for that. If people want it, give it to them, as long as they pay you, right? And the quiet photographer actually say that shallow focus is nice and small doses, but otherwise an affectation. Yes, it is. If you want actual cinematic imagery, stop. Yeah, that's another word. That's another big word that you throw there. Cinematic. Right. I don't know how people associate cinematic as being shallow depth of field, right? Even in the video world. I make videos. I shoot a lot of videos for my clients and things like that. They always associate cinematic being shallow depth of field, and I don't actually agree that completely. If you actually Google what cinematic means, it doesn't mean shallow depth of field altogether. It's the way it presents, the overall aesthetic of the video itself. Not so much about shallow depth of field, about subject separation. But of course, like traditionally, if we're using camcorder, it'd be like point and shoot cameras in the photography world. Camcorders won't give you that subject separation. And the only time that you see subject separations is in the cinema. I guess that's how they relate to it, because in the cinema, obviously they have different lenses, they have big rig movie cameras and things like that. They have different lenses. If they decided to use a much longer lens and to separate the subject, to focus on the subject's expression on their faces, that's when you see shallow depth of field. So not very often you're going to see shallow depth of field a lot. If you're actually looking a lot of, if you study movie making, you will notice that only close-up shots will have shallow depth of field. Majority of the scenery shots and things like that, setup shots at the beginning, are not shallow depth of field. Most of them are actually very deep. So this is another misconception about the word cinematic, and because of that, many people will just say, "Oh, can you just do sort of cinematic effect, which means shallow depth of field, to my photography?" And I have to blame Apple to a certain extent, and because in I think since about 4 or 5 years ago, we the iPhone has the cinematic mode, in the video shooting mode. When you select that, it will basically blur the background out a little bit, right? And because of that, people starting to think about, okay, cinematic means shallow depth of field, right? In the stills mode, it's got a portrait mode, right? But again, portrait doesn't mean shallow depth of field. So these two words, so portrait in the photography world and cinematic in the video world, is completely misused in my eyes. Totally. People are so fond with this shallow depth of field look, and they create a term for it, right? Even though it doesn't really mean it initially. So it's really strange when people mention about portrait mode and cinematic mode, throw the background out, just shallow depth of field. I like that look. I know. Let me know your thoughts about them. I just think it's silly. Similarly, like the latest iPhone 17 Pro Max, which I also have one right here. What Apple has claimed to have multiple lenses in the actual iPhone camera systems. It's totally fake, right? It's digital crop. You're not having multiple lenses. You're not having zooms. You're not actually even have zooms. These are 3 fixed focal length lenses. The zoom that you do it in the camera are digital zoom. They are basically essentially digital crop. Again, they are using it as optical zoom, optical this and optical. This is not optical, mate. Like just having a high resolution sensor, you're cropping it down digitally. It's another thing that I personally think it should be educated. When you talk to people like this, I know it makes it easier to understand. I guess it makes a lot of consumer easier to digest the information. But at the same time, for people who shoot, day in, day out as a professional, even an amateur photographer or videographer would agree, right? These are nonsense. You don't have zoom lenses there. You don't have multiple lenses. You only have 3 lenses in the camera. You don't have 5 or 8 or 24 or whatever they said, right? Totally nonsense. Similarly to portrait mode, similarly to cinematic modes, fake or not fake, I just think that they have misused the terms of these technical words in photography and filmmaking. It's just totally nonsense. But anyway, seems like I'm ranting out at the moment. But maybe time to show you some photography, and we can talk a little bit about it, right? So first of all, I just want to show you one startup image here. So this is one of my photograph that I shot probably about 5-6 years ago now, and it was a very fun fashion shoot that I did. As you can see that I actually shot it with my Micro Four Thirds EM1X. So it's a Micro Four Thirds camera, 20 megapixel, totally fine in indoor. People always say that it's not really good for low light stuff, but you're gonna have to look for light, right? You're the photographer. You learn how to adapt to different situations. You just have to utilize what you need to do in a certain environment, which what I did in this particular case. And this one I was shooting with the 17mm f1.2 Pro. I think I set it to f2, which is equivalent to obviously roughly in full frame turn 35 f4. So give me quite a deep depth of field to work with, which is totally fine. This is actually completely the look that I was going for. Imagine if I'm shooting this particular photograph if a shallow depth of field, right? If a full frame shooting 1.2 whatever aperture, it's gonna have that pop. But do I want that pop? I don't in this particular case, because I want to see the texture of these balls being lit up in the background. I want to see all the layers. I don't want them to see them blurred out completely. So this is something that I've been doing for 20 years now. And I haven't changed a bit. Photographers need to make that decision when to have deep depth of field and shallow depth of field. And this is actually becoming a norm now because, like I said, a lot of point and shoot cameras that people like to carry these days, they don't have that luxury, or they don't have that capabilities to separate subjects like we can with bigger cameras. So in that case, it's a simple thing. When you snap a photo, it's going to look like this. Of course, not technically look like this, but you know what I mean. In terms of depth of field, you're going to have a very deep distance to work with. So I prefer this to look much more than a shallow depth of field, simply throwing everything out. I'm going to show you a few more sample in a minute, just to show you my kind of subject separation compared to some of the more like a conventional portrait for the past 15 years, when people throw every subject out of the way. A background out, and just to blur them all out. And I don't really like that look completely, to be quite honest. So let's continue. Let's look at some comment here. Very few OM system ambassadors want to talk about the need OM system bringing out higher resolution sensors for their flagship. We need minimum of 24 megapixel stack sensor OM1 Mark III. Right. I would halfway agree with you, and simply because one of my recent rant video that I've done complain about the resolutions of OM system cameras. As much as I like to shoot with OM system camera for my pro jobs at the moment, I can't because of the lack of resolution. Personal work obviously doesn't really matter. I don't really care about resolution that much personally. But for my agency, there are a couple of agencies that now require me to have 25 megapixel files. And I know many of you have suggested to me before, you could use Topaz upscaling. You can upscale your photo or using Adobe Supermax resolution to upscale everything to 25 megapixel. Yes, I can. But then at the same time, you're lengthening my workflow. Which I don't want to. Time is money in my case. So like I'm churning up photos every single day, like hundreds and hundreds at a time. And upscaling photographs does take time. It's not easy. So if I have to do for hundreds photos at a time to upscaling them, they could take hours. So it's something that I'm not prepared to do. So I'm just gonna wait until OM system release a higher resolution cameras, and also at the same time, I also have Lumix. Lumix has 25 megapixel. I recently sold my G9 Mark II, but I still have the GX7, which is a 25 megapixel camera, which is totally fine. I could use that, but I also wanted to learn a little bit about brands as well, from other brands. So I started using Nikon and other system, Fujifilm, for instance. They all have 25, 26 megapixel cameras. I don't need 30, 40, 50, the high resolution cameras. I don't need them. So I never really bother looking at those models. I'm just looking at something that suits my needs. If it's my client's 125, I get a 25, 26 megapixel camera. I don't need more than that, because being a business is very different to personal want, right? And I know people want high resolution camera, but in my case, for my business, I don't really need that sort of resolution. But personally, I don't really care about resolution that much. As long as I can capture a great image, I just go on with that. I don't really need anything higher than that. But yes, just to answer your question, yes, I would hope that the next generation of OM system camera will have a high resolution sensor. That will be magnificent. But one thing that I think more importantly, not just about resolution, is potentially I just want OM system to work on the human face and eye subject detection, because now I've used other brands. I think that OM system is great at animal stuff, really great at animal stuff. They're way better than other systems that I've tried so far. But when it comes to human stuff, which I do it day in, day out as a profession, they're actually lagging a little bit behind in terms of humans' face and eye detection. And certainly compared to Fujifilm, for instance. Fujifilm's is not bad. I think it's probably the fastest so far and more accurate in terms of face and eye detection on the 26 megapixel cameras only. The 40, I tried the XT5. I think it's kind of like a hit or miss, and it's just not as reliable as the 26 megapixel camera, which is the XM5 that I have at the moment. So I much prefer the 26 megapixel sensor and the processor combo rather than the XT5 40 megapixel combo. So that is not great. But going back to the OM system, I would much prefer them to work on a little bit more. Just spend a little bit more effort, just like what they did with the wildlife stuff. They've been really focusing on those stuff for the past 5 years, and I bet just because they spent all the resources into the animal stuff, they just basically using the old human face and eye detection and just throwing it to the new camera. They didn't really improve it. That is why it's lagging a little bit. But in today's world, 2025, 26 coming now, and they need to work on it a little bit more to bring it up to date with the competition when it comes to human face and eye subject detection. Other than that, I'm quite happy with the system in general and overall. I'm still using the OM3 and OM1 for all my travel work. I still use it for street portrait. Don't get me wrong, I still use them for street portrait, but street portrait is very different to commercial portrait, because commercial portrait I need speed, I need accuracy. So that's something that I'm hoping to see something improved by OM system in the future. But let's go back to other shots. So I'm going to show you another photograph. And there you go. Right. So this is another photograph that I done using the EM1X. This is about, I would say, also 6 years ago now. So you can see that in this particular case, I did actually open up the aperture a little bit more. But at the same and oh, we have someone here. Rod is back. That's surprising.
Sorry, shall I go again?
No. You're welcome back. Welcome back. This is good. So just to bring you up to date what we've been talking about, and I basically saying that the trend of portrait photography has changed in the past couple of years, partly fueled by a younger generation of photographer who are looking for a certain type of aesthetic that can only be produced by smaller sensors, namely point and shoot camera. So the resurgence of point and shoot camera has somehow impacted on photography, especially in portrait work. So a lot of young people now, they like the small sensor look, essentially, basically harsh flash, and also deep depth of field. And this is something that we are actually quite used to back in the 80s and 90s. You see magazine works and the front covers are shot in that way. But in since early 2000 to about maybe even mid 2010s, the shallow depth of field has taken over, and so a lot of people, when they talk about portraiture, all they ever think about when it comes to gear or photography is that, I need 85, I need a minimum 1.4 aperture to separate the subject and the background. I want everything blurred out. I want to see bokeh board. The more the better, the blurrer the better, right? So this was the trend for about 15, 20 years. But now I think I can actually see from my clients' requirements and everything like that has shifted now. It's shifted back to what we are known to, what we know about like 30 years ago, when photography wasn't about shallow depth of field when it comes to portrait. So I'm showcasing some work that I've done here at the moment, just simply showing the differences between completely blurred out background to actually involving the background. To me, I personally, actually believe that this is actually the proper portrait work. Involving background is something that is very difficult to do. And in fact, I would say, I would go as far as that background is as important as the subject itself, because without the background, you must well shoot in the studio with a white sheet in the back. Having texture in the back enhances the photograph, enhances the subject. You tell the story about the person, the personality. You can enhance the texture, the overall look and feel of the photograph, and complement each other and create the actual proper portrait. You see Queen's portrait, for instance, the reason why, if you look at all the Queen's portrait, how many times do you see that is shot in shallow depth of field? Most of them will be involved in the hall, the banquet hall, the actual room with a lot of portraits in the back. It's a lot of elements in the portrait work. I think that people don't usually realize that, but when we talk about it now, people may actually start to, oh yeah, that's right. Portrait shouldn't be just about shallow depth of field. It shouldn't be about erasing the background altogether. What's your take on it, Rod?
No, I think you're right, because in portrait photography, very occasionally you might be doing a portrait where you're not in an ideal place. Maybe in somebody's house, you've got their furniture in the background, their living room. The background is getting in the way. But very often, where somebody is important, and what they're doing is important. So you're not just showing them. You need to show what's going on around them or what's behind them. So I think it is easy to overdo the shallow depth of field thing. I was on a trip where Canon was launching the new 35mm 1.4.
Yeah.
And I think that's terrific. Use it wide open. It's really sharp. But we were in a spot, we were photographing a Japanese flower artist making displays and bouquets and what have you. But when you got to a certain quite close distance, the background could have been anything, because it's so out of focus. It didn't have to be it could have been in Tokyo, or it could have been a kind of industrial unit just outside Dagenham. Could have been anywhere. So sometimes you do need to show the surroundings as well as your subject.
Absolutely.
It's the context, isn't it? It's the context.
It is. I mean, just like the leather artisan photograph that I'm showing on screen at the moment, you can see that there is a little bit of subject separations there, but I could have blown the background out even further, to basically blur to the point that you can only see colors. So like, instead of having seen the leather strap in the back, having a cabinet, you just see blobs. So like, but I don't want that. Why would I want that? This actually the complementing features that enhances the photograph in general, because he's working with leather. You really want to see the tools behind him. You want to see the mess behind him. You don't want to blur them all out. It just looks wrong otherwise. So as a portrait photographer, you really need to make that decision, when to employ or the shallow depth of field approach, because it doesn't really always work. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I said that, it's the trend. The trend was there. People always talk about bokeh. Social media doesn't really help at all. They're just fueling. When you have you got a brand new 135 f2, shoot it wide open. You look at that pop you get there. And then the smartphone company already described it a little bit. Apple called this portrait mode, which means shallow depth of field. So people always think that portrait needs to be shallow depth of field. And then similarly for video work, cinematic. And then the cinematic mode in smartphone, it means shallow depth of field again. So when people mention about cinematic or portrait, all they think about is shallow depth of field all the time. They don't really think about, those words doesn't actually mean that.
It's just become an easy answer, isn't it? I think that fashion might change. I think the harsh flash look will change
Yeah.
quite quickly, to be honest, because I think as soon as more than 3 or 4 people start doing it, it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
I think it'll go away. We'll see. We'll see.
You think so? I
I hope
personally think
so.
I think it's gonna. Well, that's you can clearly see that Rod doesn't like that. um, I think it's gonna stick around for about at least 2 or 3 years because
Do you?
yeah, I do. I mean, there are also a lot of people like that Polaroid look. You know, the old kind of 80s Polaroid look when you just pop the flash out and just basically snap
Yeah.
that shot in Polaroid. And I can see that in digital, you can recreate that look quite easily with a hard flash, you know, and that's something that I think that what they're trying to recreate.
I think in a way it makes people feel authenticity. It makes them feel like this is like homemade, amateurish of its time. It's like nostalgic. It has to be a bit rubbish in order to convince people it's real.
Yes, yes, that absolutely. So like, I just want to give you some contrast between the shot that I've done earlier and this one here. This is obviously you can clearly see that is more depth, like less depth of field now, so shallower. This is I believe this was shot with the 45 1.2 Olympus lens. So I wasn't shooting at 1.2. This is still about f2 because it's quite close, half portrait. So if you do 1.2, it will be shallower, and the flower at the back will be basically become pink blobs. So again, like I suggested earlier, like all I wanted in this particular case is some sort of texture. It may look well with ultra shallow depth of field look, but at the same time, with you looking into like really ultra shallow depth of field, for instance, you will start seeing how thin it is. And by the time you realize it, the shot is done, and then you can't go back to it because the moment is gone. And even with the f2 or 2.5 aperture that I was setting to the 45 lens on the Micro Four Thirds platform, her right arm is already out of focus. So you can see that it's a little bit out of focus. So her body is not completely in focus. So, to me, you've got to be really extra careful here because for some people, they may like that look. But for me, I think it's not very professional when you have certain parts of the body in focus and the other half is completely out of focus. The more pronounced the out of focus look in the photograph, the worse it gets. So your client may not be appreciating, how come, half of my body is out of focus. It doesn't look right to me. You really don't want people to complain about it. You can have it a little bit subtle, just not too much. So like if you shoot this in full frame, having the same thing and shoot at f2, you can easily, even both palms, she's holding the palms together, the right and the left, both of them will be out of focus because I'm focusing on her face. So if you're having a really shallow depth of field lens and shoot it wide open, and that could easily be the case. And to a certain extent, if you've got an 85 1.2, for instance, on a full frame camera, look at her face. Her face slightly tilted to one side. That means one of her lenses on the sunglasses, the lenses will be in focus, the other will be out of focus. So if you shoot at 1.2, that is going to happen, and it won't look good. It won't look professional. It's just simply wrong. So people just don't necessarily appreciate it or even understand it by the time they've done it. I mean, they go back and look at it on big screens. Oh shit, I messed it up. So and I can't go back to and retook it. It's done, finished. So it's shooting wide. When you have a 1.2 aperture lens, doesn't mean that you have to shoot a 1.2. It's something you need to master over time. You need to understand how it behaves at a certain distance and to learn about the relationship between the background and the subject. And a lot of the time, like Rod said, it's not just about blurring everything out.
I think you have to decide when you're looking at the scene what should be sharp, what should be subdued by being slightly blurred, and what should be unrecognizable. And that's a skill of mastering. Well, that's the skill of mastering depth of field, isn't it? Knowing where to stand, where to place your subject compared to the background, what aperture to use to get the effect you want. If you want the black background completely gone away, then use a really fast lens, maybe a 1.2 by all means. But if you're going to do that, you're really best getting a subject to look at you face on, not like that, unless
Yep.
you can so arrange it that it's obvious you want one eye sharp and the other not sharp. But
Yes.
the wider the aperture, the more difficult it is to get to nail it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, so another thing to consider is also focal length as well. I mean, obviously, the longer the focal length, the higher the compression. When I say compression, like you're literally compressing the facial features together a bit more. So let's say if you're shooting a 135 lens or even 200, you may open up the aperture, but you can still get the whole face in focus simply because it compresses the actual feature into one plane. And so you just have to, be careful and really, shoot more. The more you shoot, the more you understand how the lens behave, and this is probably what I'm trying to say here. So if you're shooting a 50 millimeter lens or a 35 millimeters, if you've got a really ultra wide aperture or very fast lens, for instance, you're shooting up close. That's when you see bits, gone out of focus because the focal plane is so thin and the compression is not that high, and that's when you're having this separation between the facial features, eye, nose, and mouth completely separated when shooting that sort of ultra depth or shallow depth of field. Similarly, if you've got 85, you do just a headshot, you're shooting 1.2, 1.4, again, you're getting the same thing because the compression is just not high enough. If you really want to use ultra fast lenses, just use a bit longer lens, step a bit further, and then you compress the facial features together, and then you can get the whole face in focus if you really want to do that. But it's not something that I would suggest altogether.
I think possibly something that's made it more complicated is that everyone looks at stuff on their Instagram feed, on social media. Quite often, all people have a look at is a thumbnail. And with thumbnail images, an effect has got to be super exaggerated. So, they look, if all you're looking at is thumbnails, that blur needs to be wow in your face.
Yes.
But then when you look at it at a normal viewing size, you realize, oh, that's not working.
Yeah.
But you do often, it is a bit of a problem, I think, for photographers that thumbnails don't work visually in the same way as the full-size image. What looks good full size doesn't make a good thumbnail. And what looks amazing as a thumbnail doesn't really work when it's viewed as a print. So that doesn't help. But I think that's a lot of it. People only ever look at thumbnails, and the bokeh effect or any other effect has to be in your face straight away. So it's rather exaggerated as a result, I think.
It is, and I guess that also kind of back my my early arguments about ultra shallow depth of field portrait works that's been kind of in fashion for the past 15 years. It's the first impression when you see a photograph. You got that 3D pop. The subject is completely away from the background. The background is all blurred out. People just saw that, it just catches the eye straight away. Good or bad, it just catches the eye. And then you're just saying, oh, that's portrait, right? That's portrait. And people just starting to learn about that as being portrait. And in many ways, I think that's just misconception, misunderstood the whole concept of portraiture. There are many forms of portraits, and you don't necessarily always have to blur out the background. And like I already said, if you blur it all out, that to the level that it's unrecognizable, you might as well just shoot in the studio and just put a fake background on the back.
As it's becoming increasingly easy to do exactly that. But it's all about what you want to be seen in your photograph. If you're doing a portrait in a really nice restaurant or a really nice attractive bistro with a nice bar with brass pumps and all that, you might want to keep them just recognizable, but blurred enough so that that it's not about them, it's about your subject.
Yeah.
So you're not going to shoot that wide open. You're going to have to have a little thing and work out an aperture where you get that, where your subject's face is sharp. The background is subdued, so the viewer knows that's not important, but they still get a sense of where you are. And that's a bit more difficult to achieve. Otherwise, you could be anywhere. You could shoot it anywhere.
Yeah. I mean,
you won't really know.
It is, and also this is another photograph I want to show people is that this is quite an old school way of doing things, and I mean not many people actually do that sort of photography these days. It's actually combining both ambient light and a flash, and it's actually a camera mount flash, or not camera mount. It's actually remote, but I'm using a speed light, using remote trigger on a camera. It was from M1X again. This is from the same shoot. So Michael Four Third. It was a 12 to 40 2.8 shot at 12 millimeters 2.8. So equivalent depth of field of a full frame of 5.6. So it's relatively deep. But this is exactly what I wanted, because I don't want to see too much of the foreground balls being out of focus. You can see a little bit blur there, but I don't mind that because this is actually quite a dynamic shot. So for shooting at wide open 2.8 absorbs a little bit of ambient light, but the flash is actually are using rear second curtain sync. You can see how the blur of the balls are. So it's a very old school way of doing that. I want to highlight the dynamisms and the energy of she throwing the balls out towards me. Actually, I've got hit quite a few times, and but you know, it's part of the photography here. You know, you generate motion using flash. You know, it's so something that, you know, I want to urge people to try. You know, like, even though not many people like to use flash these days, but in fact, if you use it right and use it properly, you can create a lot of fun things out of it.
I think there's so much attention on depth of field. People have forgotten about shutter speed and what you can do with shutter speed. That takes some doing, timing shots with rear curtain flash. I think I once did a shoot. I was trying to shoot a motorcyclist coming at an angle towards the camera.
Yes.
With second curtain flash, because you have to use second curtain flash, because if you use first curtain, the light trail is in front of them. You have to use second curtain to make the light trail behind them.
Yep.
And then that makes it very difficult to time. Yeah. Because you're going to have to guess when they're going to be next to the camera, when they're going to be framed correctly. So I think it's about a 2-second exposure, which is pretty hard to anticipate with a moving subject. But I going back to what you're talking about, you can separate your subjects with lighting. It doesn't have to be with focus.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
You can do it with the lighting, and that works too.
Yes.
Focus is not the only way.
Ultimately, it's the contrast between the subject and the background. You know, like for instance, if you just put the highlight onto the subject itself, if the background is darker, you know, that's already creating a subject separations there quite easily.
Yeah, and also you've got the subject separation from movement and stillness.
Yes.
So there's different ways of doing it.
Absolutely, and I just found a comment from this side to the screen, the party look.
Yeah.
And my knees into the flash look. It is a thing, right? You know, and I've noticed so many young people. I keep calling them young people because I'm quite old. So like walking along Westminster Bridge, in basically Big Ben area. And so many young travelers holding this point and shoot camera. Seriously, I see so many people using point and shoot cameras now. And they were there. They deliberately put the flash on. They do. All of them I see just flash everywhere. And they really wanted that flash look, the harsh shadow on the faces. Which, you know, to be honest, is bright enough not to have it, but they just do it.
Well, if you look at the style of photography that lomography promotes, and it must be working for them because they've been around a long time. That is that very, very kind of harsh flash retro style that some of the lomography examples promote. It's that look. It's that retro look. It's what people are trying to get back to old times, how things used to be. And also, I think I do think that they think if it's a bit amateur looking.
Yeah,
it's more authentic. It looks more like a snapshot, which is more of the moment than a properly exposed photograph. It's people just trying to regain that sense of authenticity and naivety.
But you said regain, which is, you know, it's interesting because like these are, I'm talking about young people, like the early 20s. You know, they haven't actually gained anything in the past. You know, they're just looking. They're just looking through the back to see what's on. Like, you know, before looking at all this 80s magazine.
I don't know. Then maybe it's just the aesthetic and this constant need to reject the popular. So that now that digital imaging has become almost flawless, nobody wants it. Yeah, everyone wants to go back to when it's all a bit rubbish.
I could
because it feels more real.
Yeah, I think at the same time, I think it's the whole entire world we're talking about now. Everything is like
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
looking back at the moment,
yeah,
for whatever reasons. Like cars are going retro, cameras are going retro. Even fashions like clothings are going retro. They're going back to the 80s and the 90s. Everything's kind of moving back, and because of that, I think a lot of the promotional materials for these products, well, car fashions and things like that, to highlight that they've gone back in time, they have to have that aesthetic. So a lot of these promotional materials are shot using the older method, or at least employing the
yeah.
older aesthetic, and because of that, now young people see it. Oh, I want that look. That looks cool. That flash. Oh, wow. I like that. That really kind of
That
coarse,
that
grainy look. I like that.
that's so awful. It's cool.
Yeah,
That's so real. It's great. It does feel more authentic.
yeah,
Uh, so I know I see that this side towards screen has said authenticity in an AI world. I can see that. So can I. So can I. Something that immediately leaps to my mind
yeah,
is the current crop of car ads,
yeah,
which I think we can assume are AI assisted. So
yeah,
you've got this perfect family driving along in this brand new SUV on totally unpopulated roads in
yeah.
wonderfully clean, sterile looking cities or amazing landscapes. I can't see that lasting very long before advertisers or their clients start saying, do you know what? This isn't working. We need stuff that looks real and immediate and authentic. So we're gonna have to, we want videos of people falling out of the back of the car with a bottle of Beaujolais with a harsh flash effect. I think
Yeah.
I think advertisers before too long will want a slice of the action. They'll want to return to this kind of gritty authenticity again. We'll see. That
We'll
should be
see.
interesting.
It would definitely be very interesting. And speaking of point and shoot cameras, that's another thing that I kind of brought up a little bit towards the beginning of the stream, is that the surge of point and shoot cameras, and now it looks like a lot of the camera makers are scratching their heads trying to pump out a compact camera as soon as possible. The rumor being the latest rumor for Lumix. We literally talk about Lumix hasn't released anything for 2 years, and now suddenly they have an announcement coming up, and a lot of people are speculating it's going to be the next LX100 replacement, which is the compact camera, not micro four third, not the S series cameras, not full frame. It's a compact camera, just to try to get a slice of the market. It looks like it's happening. It's really affecting everybody now. Canon's really trying to relaunch a couple of the older compact cameras. Kodak is doing very well with the cheap compact cameras.
I'm still waiting for two Kodak cameras for review. It's been awkward, so I keep chasing, saying, "Are they coming soon? They're coming soon," knowing all too well that I'm not going to be very nice about them. So I feel a bit bad about that. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, yeah, it's only time will tell. I actually personally bought a couple of Kodak point and shoot. It's arriving next month, so I'm kind of eager
Okay.
to see how bad they are. But then at the same time, apparently they are so popular that it's sold out online. So it's the world that we're living in now, especially what we talk about today. They don't really, a lot of the younger photographer, because of the point and shoot cameras they bought, they don't really care about 20 megapixel. They don't really care about resolution. They just want that look. As long as they get that look, and as long as enough for them to post on social media, which is a phone screen essentially, you don't really need high megapixel, and that means it works, right? Any 4 megapixel cameras are totally sufficient for them to post online.
But do you actually think that these old school compact cameras actually had a look? Because I don't think so. I
They
think if they had a look, it was not very sharp and noisy.
no,
That was the look.
it is the non-sharp look that they're going for. It it does in some way reminds you of the old film point and shoot cameras. Unless you go for the very high end point and shoot cameras, the most of the one that you buy for £100, those point and shoot film cameras, the lenses are not necessarily great, and then most of them, only have a very modest 3.5 f4 aperture,
Yeah, yeah,
and because of that, you don't really naturally get the subject separation anyway. No matter how you play around with the camera, you just can't get them. And then you got the not so good lenses is not very sharp to start with. So it's a very soft image if you look at them most of the time. And digital point and shoot kind of reminiscent kind of look, because it's not really a great lens to start with. Very small sensor, you don't have much detail resolutions there, and also the early sensors dynamic range is rubbish. So you're not gonna have that much clarity anyway.
No. I don't know. I've never been convinced by retro digital camera fans saying the images look different. I'm not at all convinced about that. I think they look worse. I don't think they had a special charm.
To be quite honest, I mean, I've tried. Richard Wong is in the house. Hello, Richard. It's good to see you there. Another big photography enthusiast, YouTubers online. So that's really good to see you. But anyway, I'm talking about the point and shoot camera. I did actually try to play around one of the older point and shoot camera files that I have, and in fact, if you put one of those film LUT or film presets onto the JPEG image shot with the digital the point and shoot cameras, it does actually quite easily manipulate to the point that it looks like a film camera, kind of old school film camera look.
kind of, yeah. But you can use a LUT on any digital image.
You do. Because I don't have to unblur it, right? I don't have to blur the image, because it's naturally blurred.
You've already got the vignetting.
Practically,
don't have to put it in.
It would look kind of like wrong. I mean, let's say if I use a full frame cameras or a high resolution camera and put a LUT onto it, and yes, you have the color palettes, but because it's quite sharp, and you have to do some work to make it unsharp, to make it look a little bit more authentic, put some grains onto it. But with a point and shoot camera, it naturally had that kind of bad stuff anyway.
I need to remind myself. I have to admit, I'm not quite convinced, but I might be convinced when I get these Kodaks. For a long time, during about 2010, that kind of time, I was reviewing perhaps 3 or 4 compact cameras, sometimes a week, several a month, because there's so many of them.
Yeah,
I'd spent a lot of time with them, and during none of that time did I ever think they had anything special.
Yeah,
but that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I've still got a couple in my cupboard. I've got an Olympus. Is it the XZ1, ZX1?
Oh yeah. The compact.
I've got one of those. That was all right, but I have used it comparatively recently, and I didn't suddenly think, oh my word, this was magic. I wish we could go back. I just thought, well, it's all right, but I wouldn't shoot with it. So maybe I'm not sufficiently nostalgic, but I'm not convinced they really did have a look. But your mileage may vary.
Yes, well, I don't know. I think I showed you guys this, right? I don't know if you guys can see this. I have the Olympus LT1. Which is also a film point and shoot camera with a leather cover, and it's got a very modest, I think it is a 35mm, right? Yeah, 35mm, 3.5 aperture. It will give you something really unique look to it, and apparently it's a cult classic.
It's a film camera, though, isn't it?
It's a film camera.
Yeah, I think that's a different kind of thing. I think point and shoot digital cameras don't necessarily have that same vintage look.
I have one right here. Can you see this one?
Yeah.
It's a little.
Which one's that?
It's really old Canon. This one, let me see. This is the ISIS. The
Ixus.
the Ixus. Can't even see the word now. It's been rubbed out. So 7.1 megapixel resolution. Very slow lens as well. I think it's 3.5 as well. 3.2. Ooh, it's a bit bigger than 3.5. So that's fast.
So some of those, some of the old Canon Ixus compacts are really quite nicely made cameras.
Well, this
nice
is metal.
Things.
It's metal.
Yeah,
the whole thing is metal. Yeah. It's actually pretty solidly made. It ran out of battery. I need to find a way to charge a battery. But anyway. This is another photograph that I want to show you guys. And again, we literally earlier on, Rod said that, you can use light to create subject separations, but also you can use color to separate subjects. In this case, you can see that I deliberately matching them and created contrast because the coat and the top they were wearing with the blue and the brown background. And it's a simple thing to do. And again, it really trains you as a photographer not only just to look out for the subject's emotions and the moments, but also studying the background altogether to create the shot. And the reason why a lot of the high-end photographers and they do recce before before the shoot, just because they need to look at the location and then also work with the outfit designers and things like that to make sure that everything work together. Because for high-end shoots, you do need to do that. You just can't turn up in a shoot and just shot it straight away, and everything works. It has to work together with the details and everything like that. So it's really important to understand multiple elements when it comes to portrait work. It's not just about throwing the background out of focus and that's it. For me, those are, I always say that, I actually remember I made one video and people were really angry about what I said in the video. I said Bokeh is for lazy people.
Oh, Jimmy.
Yeah, I've upset quite a few people with that video. But I kind of wanted to tell you about, yes, in some way I was speaking the truth, simply because for people who doesn't want to work hard with the photographs, the easy way out is to throw the background out, and because that's simple. You just open up the aperture, use an 85 lens, 135 lens, just shoot wide open. That's it, done. But for me, I want to do a little bit more than that. I want to involve the background, like I said at the beginning of the stream. I want to create texture. I want to create contrast. I want to create story. I want to create some fun elements into it. It's not just about the subject. The subject obviously important. The reason you have a portrait shoot is because you have the subject. But then again, without the foreground, without the background, we keep saying that. I'm going to say it again. You must well just shoot somewhere else. Shoot it in a studio. Shoot it somewhere blank, and you can put anything in the background using AI. You don't need to shoot in the location in that case. Save yourself some money. Just hire a studio and do it there.
As well, a portrait isn't necessarily just about the subject.
Yeah.
Very often, it's not just a picture of the person. It's about that person in a particular place doing a particular thing, or in the environment they live in. So there's a bit more to it than just a picture of their face, I think, very often.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a bit cropped out, actually. If you can crop it in a little bit more. Yeah, maybe like that. So, this is a slightly special case. This is actually using a 45 1.8, shooting wide open at 1.8. You can still throw the background out quite nicely with that lens, even though it's a micro four third lens, as you can see here. But, in this particular case, would you, I'm just asking the audience, would you, using a full frame and shoot wide open and blur out the leaves at the back? Or leave it in something similar to this, have a little bit of a texture? I would like to gain your opinion on this. I just want to hear your thoughts about what I just talked about. From your preference, would you like to see a more blur background or more focused background?
It depends on what significance that location had to the couple, really. I think perhaps I would have looked for more blur. Whether it would have been useful or not, I don't know. But I suspect with that shot, the background was a bit of an inconvenience, or am I wrong?
No, it's no right or wrong answer. At the same time, as like I said, for a commercial shoot, if someone pay me to do a shoot, there are requirements. There are people who always talk to me. I like the background to be more blur. I want to be more focused. I had one specific client that I shot earlier in the summer. She asked me, I want everything in focus, like literally focus. So I have to shoot f8, f11 all the time because they want everything in focus. And so it just really depends. If it's commercial shoot, you just have to oblige whatever client wants, because that's what they pay you for. But I think personally, if I really want to photograph personally, this is actually would be my preference. I don't want it to be more blur or more in focus. This is just hitting the kind of the middle ground. I just like it to be a little bit blurred, but not too much. I still see the kind of like a foliage behind, see some patterns behind. I don't want it to be just green, basically. If you really throw it out of focus, it would just different shades of green at the back.
I think I'm trying to work out what this word is we're seeing in the chat.
Yeah.
Tone.
Oh, tonne.
What's that mean? I've not seen that.
It's a it's a joking word from another channel, a camera conspiracy, and in that channel he was joking about another channel who always like to shoot wide open with everything.
Oh, I see. I see where you're going.
It's Tony and Chelsea's channel.
I was just afraid I'd sworn in an unknown language.
No, it's not,
I see. Yeah,
it's a well-known joking word for Bokeh. It just like
I get it.
It's for those people who worship Bokeh ball.
Well, the thing is that I find that I don't shoot a lot of portraiture, but I do shoot a lot of kind of street style architecture, travel photography.
Yeah,
I find it with full frame, it's actually often quite difficult to get enough depth of field.
Yeah,
you're kind of having to be a little, especially if you're quite close to the subject.
Yes.
Maybe you've got a 15mm lens on.
Yes.
It can be quite difficult to get enough.
Yes.
From near to far sharpness.
Yes.
This is one of the differences between the formats that with full frame it's a lot easier to get shallow depth of field, but it's not necessarily easier to get enough when you need it.
Oh,
so
absolutely. I mean, I can tell you a thing or two about not having enough depth of field because a lot of my shoots involving families and groups. So in those situations, you will find that it's quite a tough job using a full frame camera, because even with using a wider lens, for instance, a 28 lens, I often have to
still catches you out.
Yeah, I still have to stop it down to 6.3 f8 a lot of the time to get a shot, just because it's just not enough depth of field. If you use a Micro Four Third, for instance, I can shoot f4. It's equivalent to f8. And if I really want everything to focus, you shoot like f8, and that means like from the foreground to the background be completely in focus. You don't really necessarily have to worry too much about depth of field. Like in this particular shot here. In this shot here, I mean, it was a Micro Four Third, 25mm, and I was shooting a shot at f3.5, so equivalent to f7 in terms of depth of field in full frame. But you can see, it can still create kind of like a shallow depth of field look, simply because the reflection of the background is very far away, and that created depth. So like it's not necessary that you think that this shot is shot wide open at 1.4, 1.2. It's not like that at all. It can be delusional that people think that, oh, it must be shot in very shallow depth of field. No, I wasn't. Just because I was positioning the camera and the lens basically right next to the window. And this is actually a reflection of the girl. So because I'm so close to the window, you can see the foreground is out of focus because it's literally touching the actual window itself. And the background was so far away. So it already created that depth coming from a shallow depth of field look. But in fact, it wasn't actually that shallow at all, considering it's a Micro Four Third lens, 25mm, so equivalent of 50mm in terms of focal field of view. And also depth of field is roughly about f7 in terms of the depth of field look in the full frame world. So it's another thing to just simply have a look at, and not necessarily that you do need to shoot wide open all the time.
It's all part of the language and what you're communicating, isn't it? So in this particular shot, the background, what the girl is looking at, is actually important, but you need to give the message to the viewer that she's the main subject, and this is something secondary that she's looking at. If the background was completely invisible, the picture would lose some of its sense. But similarly, if it's completely sharp, you wouldn't really know what it was you were supposed to be looking at. So it's controlling blur is all part of the photographic language you use, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I think is totally true, and I really hope that through this video, and many of you starting to appreciate portraiture in a more deeper sense, rather than just about shallow depth of field, which a lot of especially beginner photographers who really want to get into portraiture, and first thing they will look at, and what first thing they want is something that they can get the background out of focus. But it's a lot more than just that. In fact, you can use any lens to do the portrait. You not necessarily have to get 85 or 135. You can use 25, you can use the 35, you can use the 50 for portrait. It's not restrictive to only a couple of focal length.
No. And when you get close enough with any lens, the depth of field tends to disappear anyway. So it's just where you stand, what lens you use.
Yes.
Distance of the subject from the background, etc., etc. It's not. There's no one quick answer. No one best solution.
Yeah, and Mark Dale is an overrated blur for the sake of blur.
Yeah.
Well, we I don't know who to blame this. To be quite honest.
It makes
yeah.
If it makes visual sense, it's fine.
Yes.
But if it's just an effect, and it's just an effect like any other, and it might be useful, it might not be. As I say, I think it looks great in a thumbnail, but when you look at an image full screen, you might change your mind.
And Proxty? Can't pronounce your username. But anyway, 35 can be used for some very dynamic portrait.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Very popular for environmental portraits where you're showing people in their place of work or where they live.
Absolutely, I love 35. I mean, that's why I love the 17 on the Micro Four Thirds system, because the equivalent focal length, and I love 35 for that very reasons there, and that's really nice to involve a lot of stuff. And that's why I always talk about background's importance in portraiture, and if you're using the wider the focal length you use for portraiture, the more background is going to suck into the frame, and that's when you have to start to think about a lot of stuff more than just the subject itself. For my type of photography, it's often the case. So I always have to think about the background, the importance of background, the texture, how it creates the interest through a wider lens. Using a much longer focal length like 85, 200, 135, those longer focal lengths is a lot more focused on the subject, because those focal length, I tend to use it for half-length portrait, full-length portrait, or headshot, for instance, because of the distance, right? Having a long focal length, let's say a 135 lens, you can get a full-length portrait, but you have to walk very far to do it. It's similar to 200. Yes. And it's not always practical, especially in both indoor and outdoor environment, right? Indoor, you need to have a very massive studio to be able to use that lens to do something, or likewise in the walking on the street, you need to stand really far away from the subject to be able to get full-length shots.
I think 85 has become popular simply because you can still take head and shoulders portraits in the average domestic room.
Yeah,
you can get far enough away. If you're using a 100 or 135, it is difficult to get far enough away. but it can be made to work. But I not on a professional basis, but I'm just taking pictures of my grandson's first birthday party. Yes, I was bouncing on people's knees and just having a whale of a time, centre of attention.
Yes,
I'm conscious that you're not just taking a photograph of the baby.
Yeah,
the people in the background. They don't want to be shot, but you want to be able to say, "Oh, that's so and so." They want to be recognisable. So you're often taking pictures of more than one person.
Absolutely. This is another good example of a more, I would say, classic portrait. This is obviously a wedding shot, and this was shot with 35.
Sorry, Jimmy, be right back.
That's all right. So this was shot with a 35 lens. So you can see I did stop down this lens because I actually want to get as much detail focus as possible. So this is something that I think that is very important to understand, and because I want to recreate, in this particular case, I want to recreate more like a painting portrait. So in the olden days, if you look at a lot of oil paintings, they don't really think about depth of field like that. They just want to paint everything in focus. So this is the kind of painting look that I was going for. So to involving everything in detail, I need to stop this lens down. So this was a 35. I shot at f5.6, and so in this sort of dim environments, I was pushing the camera quite dramatic, quite harsh. I only using the window light. As you can see, there's a window on the left of the frame. So only single source of light. I didn't use any artificial lights whatsoever. So it was a very difficult, challenging shot in this particular case, especially I had to stop it down because I actually intended to stop it down. I wanted to get everything in focus as much as possible. I was shooting handheld. I think it was ISO 1600. Handheld 1/50th of a second, I think, is pretty pushing it. This is the full frame camera, by the way. This wasn't Micro Four Third. I didn't use the Micro Four Third back then, so this was my only camera. So there was the Canon 5D Mark II at the time. So you can see the difference between nowadays. If I have a Micro Four Third, it will be a lot easier, to be quite honest. I can shoot 1/20th of a second, and I can even stop it down further. Stop it down f4, for instance, and using a lower ISO because I can shoot much longer, much slower shutter speed. For instance, I can still get the same shot. The things that I've talked about before. Yes, full frame has full frame's advantage, and Micro Four Third also has its own advantage, really depending on the scenarios, depending on the time when you use the camera. When I first using the Micro Four Third system, I also took my full frame side by side. So I do have two systems running along each other to weddings because I know certain scenarios, certain situations, full frame will be beneficial. And certain things like group shot, for instance, it will be much better with a Micro Four Third cameras. And I still think that this is still the way to do it because full frame definitely really good at high ISO stuff. So like very low light, and let's say in a banquet hall, if you're doing some banquet shots and things like that, full frame no doubt is actually better in that sense. But in a lot of the documentary side of it, reportage style, we're just walking around snapping stuff. You really want to get the background in the surrounding involved, the guests involved. You want depth of field, and if you got a really big format, for instance, and you're shooting wide open, you're only ever going to get a subject in focus or whoever you're pointing it to, and the rest is going to be blurred out. Again, some people may like that look, but to me, I think it doesn't look like a storytelling piece to me because everything is blurred out apart from the subject. You really want to involve the guests' reactions, how they're looking at, what they're looking at, things like that. What's happening? Are they joking around? Are they playing? Are they actually looking at their bride when they walk in? You really want to see those details, right? If they're all blurred, you really can't tell. You can see a lot of people there, but you can't really see individuals' reactions and things like that, which is what I want to capture. So I think in those instances, Micro Four Third is a much better camera to capture those instances. And for single portrait, depending on the background again and things like that, certain situations, full frame would be better. But like I said, I use them side by side just because I want to get the best out of both.
Do you think we're actually moving away from very fast lenses? There've been a couple of fast zooms recently, haven't there? And there's a couple of makers doing really fast f1.2s.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't know that there's a broad trend towards faster lenses. If anything, I get the feeling in full frame, camera makers are stepping back a bit and making more compact lenses with a bit less speed. It's kind of going both ways.
Yes, I think. Well, there are two things there. I think that for me, how I see fast lenses is that you are getting flexibility of light. And that's it. When I buy 1.2, 1.4 lens, I'm not looking for the lens for bokeh. I'm not looking for shallow depth of it. I'm looking at how much light I can gather. So I personally, if I'm given a choice, I always choose a smaller and lighter lens. Because I move a lot, I travel a lot. I much prefer a lighter lens because the way it is. But at the same time, I shoot at all kinds of lighting conditions. If there are some tricky ones. So in that case, I think a 1.2, 1.4 lens may help me in those situations and get me out of jail. In a sense, I don't have to push the ISO so high to degrade the quality. So I think the way that I used to think when I first started photography back in the 90s, that's how I was trained. Looking at exposure triangle, looking at the shutter speed, looking at aperture, looking at compositions and everything like that. That would not even a one word, not even the word bokeh ever appeared to me when I first started photography. Not a single time. Yeah, it's only until like really when digital photography became the norm and people starting to talk about bokeh, subject separations. We weren't even thinking about that when I first started, and all I care about is whether I could capture the image, execute at the right time, have the correct shutter speed, making sure it's well exposed. Because with film, right? If you're underexposed or overexposed, you're going to be running into trouble. So you really want to nail the exposure. That's all I care about. I don't really care about anything else. But now it's a very different game altogether. Of course, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just different time. But at the same time, people may have forget about the fundamentals. About a certain photography essentials knowledge. I think like the way how we look at pictures, for instance. This particular shot, harsh shadow again, but this is not a flash. This is actually direct sunlight. So, but it does give you that look of that kind of like a deep depth of field, harsh shadow, harsh light shot. And she's wearing a white dress, a white dress, which is good. It's got to create a big contrast between the pinks that she had, the balloons and the flowers. So it works as a photograph. But I think that if I photograph this in a much shallower sense, it may not have the same impact. I think it may actually look a bit wrong if I shoot this ultra shallow depth of field, because you got a very harsh kind of look to it. You do need the complementary harsh shadows on the background to create that view, create that vibe. Otherwise, if you throw the background out to focus, a bit blurred out, you will lose the background harshness, and it means that all the harsh shadow on the subject's face is too much. It doesn't contrast well. So in this particular case, the harsh shadow in the background complements the harsh shadow on her face and her body. So I think that you need to be sure that you be able to recreate that vibe using the correct contrast.
You have to make sure that the tricks you use don't clash with each other, and
No.
they all work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the things I think that makes black and white photography easier than color, because if you're trying to work with light in color, very often the color is working in a different direction to the light. If you've got very muted, harmonious colors, it can take away a lot of the impact you're trying to create with the lighting. So it's keeping everything heading in the same direction with the same overall style.
Yeah,
I guess that's what you're driving at.
I think so. Yeah, and this is kind of looked at. Obviously, is in fashion now, and so people are trying to get this kind of look all the time. Both in magazines and also in social media. It's a trend. Can you say this is from a compact camera? No, you can't use the compact camera to create this look. But this is kind of the aesthetic they're going for now: harsh shadow, punchy colors, high contrast, lots of depth of field, and this is the kind of thing that they're looking for now.
It's like a brash authenticity. People don't necessarily want soft and romantic. Sometimes they want dramatic and showy.
Yeah,
if I can put it that way.
So there's another shot that I've done. Shot of f6.3. Again, a lot of the photograph that you see here, I often stop down, like I said right at the beginning of the video or the stream today. I shot wide open, sometimes, but not all the time. And in fact, most of the time when I do shoots like this, I stop the lens down anyway. Not only get better sharpness, better resolution, but also I simply don't need it. If everything's well lit, if you've got a plain feel like this, there's no kind of foreground interest, and this is just a surrounding of the subject, you don't need to shoot at 1.4, you don't need to shoot at 1.8. I just stop way down. You can get everything nice and sharp, and you can process your photo accordingly afterward. So again, I know you pay a lot of money. Many people pay a lot of money for those 1.4, 1.2 lenses, but doesn't mean that you have to shoot everything wide open, because having a deeper depth of field has multiple benefits in the photographs. Of course, many of you already know that stopping that lens down gives you better contrast anyway, better sharpness and everything, right? 1.2, 1.4, in high-end lenses, they're great, but still no match when they stop down. All these expensive lenses, when you stop down, you get even better quality. And they are there, once again, if I have to reiterate, is for light gathering purposes. It's not just for separation. and you just have to really get that thing into your head. Like the 1.2 is not for bokeh, it's not for subject separation, it's for light. It's the light. The aperture is for light, it's not for separation.
So here's a question. We never used to worry about bokeh, and I'm using it in the strict sense, which is how the defocus looks.
Yeah.
Not just a question of whether the background is blurred or not, but what the blur looks like.
Yeah.
This seems to be a relatively recent thing, so it's either because people have only just started looking,
Yeah.
or it's because with digital cameras and digital lenses,
Yeah.
the bokehs can be quite nasty.
Yeah.
And we just started to notice. I suspect the reason we never bothered too much in the past was that the look of out of focus areas was always quite nice, because the lenses are quite basic, quite straightforward, and you didn't get the same kind of business in the bokeh.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we've all got fixated on bokeh because digital lenses are not always equal. They can produce quite a nasty effect as well as a nice one.
Absolutely. I mean, like it, and that's another thing about opening up. In this particular case, that this sample photos here, I did open up all the way for this one. This is 17 1.2. The reason I did that is for the flare, right? Okay, this is a separate, kind of like a separate thing altogether, because this type of flare you see on the screen right now can only be achieved when the lens opened up. Otherwise you're going to get streaks and something slightly different altogether. You really can't get that. A lot of this is actually internal reflection. So you only get that shape, get that look, get that color when you shoot the lens wide open. Sometimes when I do photography, and if I want some romance hitting the subject, I would like to recreate the effect if the light is there. This is actually a very strong sunlight behind the subject, and I just wanted the light to be reflected through the lens elements back out to create this look. And this is almost kind of like my signature, because I do utilize a lot of lens flare to create my shots. So this is the only time when I shoot the thing wide open, when I see something crazy like this and I'll recreate something like this, and I want to shoot wide open, because I know if I stop down the lens I will not get this effect. So this is only done it for artistic purposes, for a certain effect that I want to create. Other than that, I already explained it. I usually would just slop the lens down.
Are you tempted, Jimmy, by software that can put in light leaks?
No.
Do you have a reason for that?
No. It may just be me. It may just be me. Simply because I think I tried it. I mean, I tried putting fake light leak from different software, but it never looked natural to me. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not very good at manipulations, but I just think that every time I put a fake light leaks or light flare into the photograph, they just simply look wrong. It just looked nothing like how I would recreate naturally. So I don't know. It just somehow the contrast level doesn't look right. The color doesn't look right. And like I said, maybe I just need to do more work to the photograph. But if I have to do that much work, I might as well just start it correctly in the first place.
You want your photographs to look real, Jimmy? You need to catch up. We're in the AI world now. Photographs aren't supposed to look real.
Oh gosh, don't even get me started on AI.
Sorry.
Yeah,
but it's sorry. Go on.
No. Keep going.
No, I was only going to say that we think that software offers us more control than doing it in camera, but it never quite looks the same.
Yeah.
I use software where I can choose from about 50 different light leak patterns. I can adjust the angle, the scaling, the intensity, the direction, and so on.
Yeah.
But it's all kind of different kinds of fakery. It can look all right. It can look quite good, but I know it's fake, and I have that feeling about the photograph when I've done it. I don't know whether other people would feel it looked fake or not, but it's not quite the same.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's something about digitally manipulated images. But then again, some great artists can really make it look real. If you're not the photographer or originator of the image, people can easily believe that that's a real image. And but for me, if I already created a portrait, if I want to do work to it to make it look to a certain kind of effect that I could possibly recreate in real life. I simply can't do that, just because I know it's fake. That's one thing. And second is, I know I can do a better job with the real thing, so I might as well just shoot real for rather than just do it digitally in post. I just don't think that is that's for me, to be honest. I know people can, but it's just not something that I'm very either good at or just fond with.
Just don't tell your clients they can have light leaks, because then you'll have to put them in.
Just punch a hole in the back of the camera, right? You got a proper light leak there. So this is another sample images I created to simply using distance as depth, right? It's partly related to depth of field, of course, and but again, this particular case, you can actually see. This is actually a motorcycle, and so I asked the bride to basically sitting next to the center of the motorbike, so the front wheel is basically touching my lens. So again, I just using something very close to the lens to create the depth and the dimension in the frame, rather than shoot it wide open. The reason I do that is if I, let's say, shoot it wide open, this is a 35 again, 35 millimeters. If I use a 35 and using 1.4 aperture, for instance, the foreground, which is in this case the wheel of the motorcycle, will not have those little patterns. I don't know if you can see that on the left side of the frame. You see these little patterns of the rings going around, and you will lose that because it will completely blurred out. It just became a gradient of grays and black. I really want the textures in it, so the only way to get those textures is to stop the lens down, and to create even more kind of interesting patterns around the whole frames surrounding her, instead of just saying basically kind of like a white haze over her. And if I basically open up the lens altogether, you can see how deep the depth of field is if you look into the motorcycle body. So quite a big chunk of it is actually in focus. So this is quite a deep depth of field shot. In contrast to what people may think, because of the blur elements in it, people might think that, oh, you must have a very fast lens. You might have a 1.4, 1.2 lens. I do have a 1.4 lens, but I didn't shoot at 1.4. In fact, I actually stopped it way down to 5.6.
I quite like shooting wide open outdoors. I'm fixated on this idea of recreating the look of vintage cameras with very large negative sizes, say 4x5 or 10x8, where you always had shallow depth of field outside. The only problem is, if you do that with a 1.8 or a 1.4, it's too bright. It's too bright. You need electronic shutter or ND filters. But that to me is a more effective way of creating a vintage look. It's a very subtle thing. But when you've got an outdoor shot where only your subject is sharp and things in front of and behind your subject are defocused, that is a very good basis for a vintage look, because that's the kind of look old cameras used to do. Right. But I tend not to use wide apertures in low light, strangely, because, for example, the times I most encounter low light, if I'm photographing interiors, either of historic houses or cathedrals or other landmarks, and very often what you actually need is depth of field, because you've got stuff in the foreground, stuff in the background. It's one of those instances where you're not trying to isolate anything. You want to show people everything. Very often you do need a smaller aperture for that. Right at the time when people would be saying, oh, you need a fast lens. Actually, no, you just have to use a smaller aperture and put up with the ISO or put up with the shutter speed that you get. I think it's a better result, really. So I don't think having a fast aperture is always a cure for low light, because it doesn't always suit the picture.
Well, people forget about one thing sometimes, is that, in the exposure triangle, there are three elements to basically control the exposure. Aperture is one thing, but also got the shutter speed and also the ISO sensitivity. So there are three elements there for you to control. So a lot of people is like, just aperture, just open it up, close it down, open up, close it down. But also shutter speed, you can lengthen it, you can shorten it, and you can, if those two elements you want to fix a certain look, you got the certain speed you want to capture, a little bit motion blur, you slow shutter speed, and then you can control the aperture depending on how much you want to capture. and then you just raise and lower the ISO to accordingly to correct exposure. So all these three elements need to work hand in hand together to create a shot for the exposure that you want and you need. So again, there's no right or wrong answers there. It really purely depends on the photography that you want to do or type of thing that you want to photograph. If you want to freeze the moment or you want to have a little bit of motion dynamics into it, and all of that taken into account, and then you have to judge it. You're the photographer. I mean, I can't tell you that is correct, that is wrong. It's just really depending on the stuff that you're photographing altogether.
That's what you're trying to do, isn't it?
Yeah, like Blaine said earlier, about macro, right? Macro, yeah, depth of field. People always say, oh, you got a macro lens, right? In macro lens, you got to buy the fastest you can get, right? The 2.8, there's the 100 2.8 or the 60 2.8. If you just shoot at macro level, the 2.8 aperture, it'll be so thin, you're literally only getting a hairline thing in focus.
if you get close to 1-to-1 ratios, f16 won't do it. You're going to have to look at focus stacking, really, as the only solution. But this whole exposure triangle thing is interesting because one of my things I tested with the OM5 II, I wanted to show the stabilization in action. So I took a photograph of a statue in a very dimly lit underground grotto, which had like a spring run down either side of it. Yep. So I needed to get it sharp, but at the same time I wanted the water to blur. Right. So I shot it at half a second handheld, which is risky, but it's what the shot needed to work. Yep. If I just opened the aperture up and used an ordinary shutter speed, the water would have been still. I'd have got a sharp shot, but it wouldn't have looked how I wanted it. And similarly, if you're in a crowded interior, like if photographing the interior of a church or a cathedral, and you've got a whole bunch of people milling around, it's kind of better to shoot that at about a second if you can, than it is to do it at the 30th or a 60th. Because if you can blur them a little bit, that takes it reduces their ability to distract people from the image itself. It makes them less important. So it's not simply a case of just opening up the aperture because it's got dark. Sometimes you need movement blur anyway.
You do. I mean, I think that the right amount of blur. Sometimes you just don't have enough. It just kind of look wrong in some way, and sometimes having it too much and it doesn't look well either because it's become streaks, and then you just need to have the right amount of blur. And again, this can be done via experience, or you just a little bit of try and error there.
I mean, blur can come from defocusing, but it can also come from movement.
Yes,
there's more than one way to get blur.
Absolutely.
If you can set up a tripod, a long exposure is a great way to get rid of passers-by or make them a kind of abstract element in the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So this shot again, I don't know how many of you shoot like to shoot street photography. I personally like street photography, and a lot of street stuff I do actually involving f8. Because I like to tell stories. I like to capture everybody's emotions and actions on the scene. So very rare that I would shoot things wide open. Although I know a couple of known photographers like to shoot things wide open, especially the Leica crowd. And then I know some of the Leica communities love street photography using their Noctilux 50mm f/0.95.
Good luck
and
with
they shoot wide open 0.95, so you can imagine that depth of field. So you basically things in focus will be in focus, and the rest is out of focus.
And you will lose so many shots.
Yes,
doing that because bless them, Leica M cameras are not easy and quick to focus with.
No,
maybe after years of expertise, yes, but initially, no.
But then again, it may look interesting and novel at first, but I think over time you will realize that it just becoming a style, and the style does not necessarily translate into a good image. You still need to tell the story. You still need to have all those elements behind and in front of the subject to create the shot. And having shallow depth of field, I think, not necessarily create that shot.
It's also not that easy to visualize what you're going to get because all modern cameras, they focus wide open. So what you see in the viewfinder on the rear screen is at maximum aperture. But if you're using a smaller aperture, what you get you've always got to check what you see in instant playback, because that's going to look different. So
Yeah.
everything you see is wide open. I think that's true of OM cameras. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remind myself whether it's true of all of them. I think it is. I think all
Well,
the metering and focusing is done wide open.
yes and no.
Ah,
Because I think there is a limit for before the risk of burning the sensor. So like if the outdoor light is really strong, the lens actually stop down a little bit. And so what you see is not necessarily the same depth of field you're gonna get. So you have to
no,
check it really carefully. But there is a depth of field preview button on the on
yeah,
OM1.
yeah.
I think you can create a custom button for depth of field
But
preview, and that will give
it's
you
it
the exact setting.
but it's easy to forget that you need to do that to preview
Yes.
the depth of field, because you might be shooting at f8, but what you
Yep.
see in the viewfinder, that's an f1.4 or
Yeah.
f2. When you change the aperture, it doesn't change what you see in the viewfinder. So you will often find that they've actually got more depth of field in the image you captured than you saw in the viewfinder or on the rear screen,
Yeah.
unless you use
Absolutely.
your depth of field preview.
Yes, I mean, in fact, this is a kind of old thing since SLR days. We used to have a depth of field
Yeah,
preview
yeah,
lever on the
yeah.
camera body. You just slide it across to see the depth of field.
It's it's pretty awful myself, but I guess it's the thing. But that's the thing. That's the thing that I just think you need to keep in mind. When you're looking at through your viewfinder, everything is
Yeah.
wide open, and if you know what you actually record might be a bit different to that. I don't know if there's any way around that. It's one of the reasons though I quite like shooting on my. I like doing street photography on my
Yeah.
phone.
Yep.
Partly
Yep.
because it's very mobile and easy, and partly
Yes.
because everything is in focus. So that's something you can stop thinking about, and you
Yeah.
can pose your shots on that basis. You know, it's one
Yes.
less thing to try and juggle.
Yes, absolutely. You know, when you have a fixed aperture, on a phone, nothing you can adjust. You just
Everything's sharp.
so
Everything's
everything is sharp and everything is there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
what you see, what you get. So with camera,
yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
you've got more control. But the downside is that you may actually often forget exactly what the outcome will be if you're not careful. But out of that interest, yeah, how many of you actually use depth of field preview in your camera? I'm pretty sure all camera will have that feature. And I wonder how many of you actually use that. And this is from the
But,
old days, right? The depth of field preview is since the SLR days. It's not something new. It's always been there, even in digital cameras.
oh yeah, yeah. And the reason I bring it up is because there have been times when I've been shooting, and I thought that looks nice,
Yeah.
but I've forgotten that I'm actually shooting at f8. So that when you look at it in playback, there's a lot more depth of field than you thought it was. But you but you can also get trapped in a kind of no man's land between blurred backgrounds and sharp backgrounds.
Yeah.
You can get into kind of no man's land where the background isn't blurred enough to be interesting or sharp enough to be
Yeah.
satisfying. You can end up in the middle of nowhere. It's not an easy thing to get exactly right. So I would
Yeah.
normally either shoot at a wide aperture or a small one,
Right.
because anything in
Right.
between feels like guesswork
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I learned my lessons the hard way when I first started the portraiture, and then like I got lenses and I didn't have enough light or open up aperture, then I found that
Yeah,
the guy next to him or whatever behind him is completely out of focus. So I learned the hard way when I
yeah.
first started photography. But like I didn't attend any photography school to become who I am today. I mean, it's all through practice and basically try and error over time. But that's why I'm
Well,
sharing this stream with you guys today, and just let you know that my view of photography, especially portrait work, and often think that bokeh isn't everything. It's good if you use it right, but if you're not, you simply are creating something that what everybody has been doing for the past 15 years.
well, the trouble with learning about a subject is that by the time you come to use it, what you've learned is out of date. Fashions change very quickly. I
Yeah,
don't know what they teach in for photography courses these days. Hopefully, they teach creative expression and understanding your own ideas.
yeah,
Hopefully, they don't go on too much about ISO settings and shutter speeds and apertures too much. I mean, you need to know this stuff to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be ruled by it.
No.
It's just a tool.
Absolutely. And Chuck actually said that I do use EM1 depth of field preview on the EM1. Hey, got one person using it.
Excellent, excellent.
Very good, very good. And this side to a screen, I use Pentax camera, so every photo is perfect.
Every photo is a perfect Pentax photograph. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Great.
So, which I'd like to know which Pentax it is actually. So maybe.
Yeah. Tell us which Pentax you got. Is it a new GR?
Yeah.
I would like to hear about that.
Even though, of course, they are all perfect. So perhaps it doesn't matter, but interesting to know.
I agree. Our eyes don't work with bokeh in the brain compensates. Yeah.
And you see, bokeh is an alien concept of the human eye and the human brain. It's a purely photographic construction. Oh, Pentax KP.
Yeah, and MX1. I like the MX1.
Okay.
There you go. I like the MX1.
Yeah. Classic tastes.
Yes, classic taste. I like the brass body on those, so that was good. Right here, I used to shoot wide open because of light and need for high shutter speed wildlife. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I have used the preview when stopping down certain photo. There's another stopping down. Yes, cool. And also depth of field preview. Great stuff. Great stuff. Good to hear. Good to hear.
I think depth of field preview works much better on mirrorless cameras because the LCD brightens. Yes. And you can see what's happening. If you use depth of field preview on an SLR, it's like somebody put the lens cap on. You know, you get depth of field preview, but you can't see anything because it's too dim. But it works well on mirrorless cameras.
The reason that mirrorless cameras always have the lens wide open when you view when you look through the viewfinder or the back screen is because of the preview itself, because it's electronic, it's not optical. And as you know, that if the light becomes dim, the electronic has to push harder, and the viewfinder will not be as clear, even though it may have high resolution. It's just simply become noisy. So that's the reason why they just keep it wide open most of the time.
It's also better for the autofocus, much better.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the autofocus has got something to work with. Whereas if you stop down, the contrast there, if it's going to struggle more on the phase detect, won't be as accurate, I would think. So this is why they always wear it wide open, but it's easy to forget that's what they're doing.
Yes. And Owen76, I like this photo. Thank you. Yes. See if I got another one to show you guys. And I got another one here. Now, this is a typical example of a family shot that I want to get everything in focus. So this was a micro four third photo. So I was shooting even with micro four third. I stopped the lens down to f8 for this one, so equivalent f16 the depth of field in a full frame world. So this is the kind of thing that I'm looking for. In this particular case, I just think that having everything in focus is magnificent, because the greenery behind, the foliage behind, the grass behind, the flowers and everything, I think it creates quite an interesting background. And this is something that you don't really see that often these days. And because you look around many portrait photographers' website, you look at a lot of portrait Instagrammers and things like that. You look a lot of their work, and most of them are shallow depth of field. Most of them would basically blur out the background. How many of them you will see something like this? You don't. And this is in fact something that my clients quite treasure, because they actually say, wow, actually I remember this shot where I took it, because they can see the background, and they like the aesthetic, they like the detail and the colors behind it. So you really just need to be careful sometimes. I think that don't follow the trend too much. I know you can be trendy. If you only do it if your clients ask you to do it, but if not, if you have the full artistic license, use it what you like and what you think is right. And I think that's the most important part as a portrait photographer. Don't blindly follow the internet trend and everything. You are a photographer, you have a distinct style and taste of photography. exploit it. If you got the chance, if your client lets you do it and use your own judgment and things to do your photography. Don't just shoot everything wide open and just blur everything out all the time. And I think that is probably works in your favor over the long term, because you become you as a photographer, and people know you as you, and they choose you because they like your style, like your way of, like your approach to photography, rather than, oh, that's trendy, because everybody can do the same thing, right? And in that case, people will be judging you as price otherwise, because he can do the same work as you, he's cheaper than you, I go for him, right? So don't fall into that trap.
So all you need now, Jim, is a lot on that, a bit of a light leak, and maybe some dust and scratches, and we're back in the 1970s. Brilliant.
Isn't that good? Okay. Owen actually said a 1-to-1 ratio would be nice for this particular shot. You might be
nice,
right,
but the problem is you never know what people are going to want.
Yes.
What you're going to need for your website. Whether you're going to need a square thumbnail for a particular channel, or whether you're going to need a 16:9 shot for a slideshow. Whatever crop you do, it's never quite right. Well, you just need to have some flexibility.
But it's an interesting line, interesting comment here, because how my brain works these days. This always been the case since about 15 years ago. I have adapted to the way that every time I make a shot, I could easily crop into 1:1. I could easily crop into 16:9. I can easily crop to 4:3. So my brain works in a multi-racial, kind of shooting experience.
Multi-aspect.
Multi-aspect. So I can easily see this shot as vertical. I can easily think of this as a square. So like I compose the photograph in a way that I could crop in multiple ways. So that's how I do things these days.
We need square centers. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Like on 120 film.
That's another person's. Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't remove the person in the background.
There's no need. There's no need. The scene is what it was. It's fine. It's part of the place they are, I would say.
There are two things here. Right, okay. Aesthetically, yes, you might be right to have no people behind. And I could easily remove it, especially in today's AI stuff. But at the same time, I always do it as a business. I always say that's an extra service. If you want me to remove it, I charge you a few more extra bucks. So that's my business.
You might get some clients who want you to remove people in the foreground. Don't like them anymore. They've got to go.
So that's the reason why I didn't remove anything. I just my little secret trade there, And if people want to remove it, yes, that's £50 per person removal there. They got two people. I got £100 there.
That's a good racket to be in. I've never thought of that.
Yes. That's why I don't remove things now. Now you know the secret.
I've just got to answer one question here from Jay Carricker saying, would I be dumb to sell my 5G Mark IV and invest in Micro Four Thirds lenses? All I would say, as an inveterate seller and buyer of gear, is if you love it, keep it.
Yeah.
Because you'll be sorry. You'll be sorry if you sell something that you're really attached to. So I would say probably not.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree, and especially if you pamper your gear, and you will never get the same quality, because a lot of the gear that you sell may not be available new anymore, and in that case, you'll be struggle to find the same quality and same condition as the one you just sold. So like,
you will. You will.
I still regret it today that I sold my 85 1.2 Canon L lens, the Mark II one. And I know it can still get a reasonable condition ones, but I know I pamper that lens a lot, so I know it's a good condition. I won't be able to get one like that now. So it's a bit of a shame. So something that I regret over time.
And there was a lens with a look, and just as lenses can have looks, cameras can have a feel that you can never quite replace. So be careful what you sell.
Oh yes, all the time. So here's another portrait that I want to show you guys. So simple thing, plain background, negative space is quite easy thing to do. It works both black and white and color in this particular case. It's another thing. You can see that this particular shot here, it wasn't wide open either, and you don't need to, because it's a plain background. You can't see the blur between the foreground and the background.
Yeah.
So there's no point to it. So it's another demonstration that how photographer can control the cameras and to create a photograph without having to play around the depth of field, because in this particular you simply don't need any depth of field adjustment. You just need to get enough to get the subject in focus. You can shoot at f8. If you shoot at 1.4, it makes no difference either. Either way would do. So in this case, I only control the aperture for light gathering purposes only. So that's the perfect example to kind of back up what we said earlier about aperture is for control light, not depth of field.
Can I say a word about composition as well?
Yep.
We are all aware that everyone at every camera club judge will say this is wrong, because the subject must be looking into the frame, not out of it.
Yeah.
But I think this is another example of fashion always rebelling against tradition.
Yeah.
So I think in this case, when you break one of these old-fashioned rules of composition, you create a more impactful image.
Yes.
Because you've done the wrong thing. So having somebody over on that side of the frame, not looking into the center of the frame, is exactly the right thing to do to distinguish it from all the other shots which have been photographed in a classical manner.
Yes.
Sometimes you should decide to break the rules and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started portrait photography, and I talked to a lot of master, as you would say them, because they're much more experienced. They're in the field for longer, and they all of them tell me one thing. They always say that don't be afraid to break the mold. Don't be afraid, to not follow the traditional rules, because that will set you apart from the rest. And because if you do follow the rules, and everybody follows the rule, and they all look the same. Essentially, go back to the same argument that I had earlier. People will not be choosing as for your style, but for price. So in that case, you lose your business. If you really want to be in business for long, you need to have a distinct style, distinct approach, be creative about what you do, and be different to what other people can do. So this is the only way to, I would say, to be successful in today's world, because there's so many photographers out there now, and everybody can do the same thing more or less. And with the right equipment, they all produce more or less the same photographs. So it's really hard to distinguish yourself from others. And the only way to do it, really, you have to work a little bit harder in your composition, work a little bit harder in creativity side of it, and also understand more about the photography itself in general.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's best to be doing something different if you want to stand out. I was trying to think of an analogy, but I could only think, the only one I could think of was that if you're going to sell chicken nuggets, you're going to be competing on price. You might be better off trying to sell caviar, because
yes,
you won't sell as much, but it'll cost a lot more.
Oh yes. Is another sample. This one, I can't remember which lens I was using now. This possibly a 50mm 1.4. I think this is Summilux. This is probably a Leica lens. Menu focus. In this case, I did shoot a slightly wider aperture. I think it's f2. And you can see the front foliage is a little bit out of focus, and the background behind her is also a little bit out of focus. So I think they shoot relatively wide, but not 1.4, but it's probably about f2 to 2.8 or something like that. And again, my approach to photography is always trying to create depth, no matter what. Even if I shoot with a deep depth of field in mind, so I always trying to create depth by playing around with foreground and background. So in this particular case, you can see that both sides I actually have I'm actually shooting in between two poles. So you can see the actual out of focus areas there in the front, left and right. They're actually two metal pole there. And I deliberately do that just to create a little bit of a sense of depth there instead of just using the foliage in front of her. Because otherwise it's a little bit boring. So in this case, remember what I said earlier? I shoot things in my head about multi-aspect ratio. So in this case, I can use it vertically, crop out the poles on either side. Yeah, total vertical, it works. I can do it horizontally like this, so it looks a little bit interesting. You can do square just on her. So like it's something that I always try to do, because I know that my client may crop the photos, for the social media. You never know what sort of crop they want. They might want vertical, horizontal, square, circle even. You just don't know.
Exactly. I like the idea of shooting between things and through things. It's a very interesting composition.
Yes.
I joke well. Also, you're always looking for ways to get rid of an annoying or distracting background. Very often, you can do it by putting something in the foreground in the way. You can do it with the foreground as well. You can obscure stuff you don't want to see just by shooting past or between things.
Yeah,
it's an interesting way of doing it.
And thank you for your comment and about me talking about aperture. I think it is useful to do photography talks like this, Rod. And it's not just about gear, because gear obviously is very important, but at the same time, the approach to photography, how you can be better utilizing your gear. You may have a 1.4 lens, doesn't mean that you have to shoot 1.4, because it's just there, if you want to use it in case. But a lot of the time, we want to discuss the philosophy behind the approach to photography and also certain style. I can talk about this because I do this for 15, 20 years now. I mean, I can talk about this. I mean, I'm not an expert in macro, for instance. I mean, if I ask me to talk about macro photography, I'll probably have to find some experts on it. You want to talk about landscape, you can talk to Rod about that. Rod can talk to you about landscape a lot. But yeah, it's something that I think this community needs, the photography community needs. It's not just about YouTube channel, not just about people who want to showcase the greatest bokeh ball and when you use a one of the latest lens out there. It's cool to see that, but it's not photography, right? It's just about gear. So what we're trying to build is a community of photographers appreciating each other's work and also trying to learn a little bit more. I mean, I'm still learning every single day. I mean, I saw a new approach. I'll try it myself. If it works, it works. If it don't, well, I will just skip and move on. So, one good thing about photography is, like what we talk about today, is the trend changes all the time. And with that, you learn new things, because if you are not born in the 90s or born in the 80s and learn photography through the 90s and the 2000s, you wouldn't know about those styles, right? If you're born like from 2000, if you're a young photographer, for instance, if you're born in the 2000, you will have no idea what the 90s looks like. So, this is all interesting stuff, so you're always going to learn something new, even though they may call retro or, vintage a vibe and aesthetic. And it's all new to certain people. But for me, because I started in the 90s, whatever I'm seeing now in the magazines and social media, they are the 90s look. So because I've been through there, so this is the look that we're looking at right now. Okay, let's see. There you go. It's another depth of field, and again, should stop the lens down all the way to 6.3 for this shot. Is easy because it's all in the same plane, so very simple. Breaking the pattern, I'm pretty sure that many of you had heard of that term. So for street photography, this is a simple portrait with horizontal stripe and planks of wood behind. So it just breaks the pattern. It just creates a contrast, and it's a very simple thing to do. Again, this one works in color and black and white. So it's a very simple thing to approach. Let's see if another one. I got another one. Yay! It's another one here. That's again a different pattern, but still a pattern. This time going vertically. So, in photography, we can talk about all day long. I can talk about every different approach and different things we can create. Using light, using contrast, using color, using patterns, and all sorts of things to create contrast. And all of these shots that you've seen for the last few frames, none of them were shot wide open. You can see that everything's in focus. Everything have the depth in it. So most of these were stopped down to 5.6 and 6.3. So portrait doesn't need shallow depth of field. This is the whole point about today's talk, is because not only the trend is that way, but I want to highlight the fact that, people have often forget about, depth of field is not just about shallow for portrait work. In fact, most portrait that I've done is never wide open.
Yeah, for sure. And the main thing is as well with shallow depth of field, there are dozens of ways to make photographs work, dozens of tricks. We have to not forget the old ones just because there's a new one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Depth of field is only one of the things you can do in photography to make pictures work.
And now really put you into perspective, right? Because of what I do, before what you can see in these images, that means you can easily do this with your phone. You can easily do this with a compact camera. You can easily do this with a micro four thirds. You don't need a full frame. You can do it with any camera, because of the depth of field that I just talked about. This sort of look, you can easily do it in a phone. Because, I don't need to blur the background out, right? If you don't need to blur the background, it opens up a lot of opportunities to whatever gear you have. So that free yourself quite dramatically, instantly from the gear. So this is something that maybe perhaps even not many people talk about, because to achieve shallow depth of field, you do need a certain type of gear. You do need a larger format. You do need a larger aperture fast lens, for instance, mostly expensive. So not many people can afford $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, these days. I mean, I certainly can't. If it's not for work, I probably will stick with my cheapo cameras. But because it doesn't make financial sense in most cases, especially people tend to upgrade or update their gear every 2 years, and I'm just simply not rich enough to do that, to be honest. But for if you're really truly into photography and love photography, what I'm telling you today in this live stream here, how you can utilize deeper depth of field to do your photography, will free you up instantly about the gear. You don't need expensive stuff to do things like this, right?
The tyranny of Bokeh.
Bokeh cost.
Well,
it is.
No, this is a good point. There is a significant proportion of the photographic audience that wants things to be expensive and difficult. Yeah. They're not interested in things that anyone can do. They're only interested in things that only they can do. So there is often a certain amount of snobbishness in photography.
Yeah. Well, that's what they do, right? Unfortunately, in some way, that's what the manufacturer want them to do, because you can only do this sort of look with my lens, because my lens can give you that shallow depth of field. My lens can give you that flare. My lens can give you that sun star, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That pretty much it. Yeah, it's so much to do with the marketing, unfortunately. But
escalation of expectation. That's what I'm calling escalation of expectation. But it's really not necessary. There's far more photography than the gear.
Oh yes,
it's having eyes and a brain as well.
Absolutely, I think it is, but I think it's fun today, and really do. And it's coming up to 2-hour mark, so I think that we will have to wrap up for today's chat. But really, a big thank you for you guys all joining us today and contributing to your all your comments and your reflections on what we talk about today, about bokeh, about shallow depth of field, about portrait photography. I'm really passionate about it. As you can tell, I get quite animated when I talk about portrait work, and so it's something that I enjoy doing. I hope you enjoy listening and also seeing some of the images. And I thought Rod wasn't going to be here, and then he suddenly jumped halfway through. But I'm really excited to see Rod join back.
I was having a cream tea on the steam train.
Oh, how nice was that? Oh, was it good? Was it good? I really.
It was quite good. Yeah. We took the dog down. The dog was terrified. Carried it. So we felt bad. We took
the dog to the train for cream tea.
Well, no, she didn't get the cream tea. I mean, we have boundaries. We have boundaries. But we took the dog so she wasn't left at home. But she was fine on the upward journey. Then the train disconnected, came round to the back and took us back to the station. Yeah. That's when it all went scary. So
oh gosh.
I have to cross that particular activity off the list.
So where was that? Where was that steam train with cream tea?
It was in Somerset. It was near Shepton Mallet. It is the East Somerset Railway.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Well, it's Devon cream tea, kind of Somerset cream tea, I guess. But
Right.
could have done with a bit more cream. But what can you do?
I, I,
What can
I
you
love
do?
I love my cream tea. I love my cream tea.
Well,
So
see,
any
the
opportunity I have,
argument
I will get
is
one.
some people say put the cream on then the jam. Some people say
uh
some people say put the jam on then the cream, but that's
yes.
wrong. That's wrong. No, 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 it's
Okay.
wrong. Cream first,
Right.
then jam.
Apparently, it's a
It's
different.
just
Depends where you are, right? I heard. I
yeah.
heard depending where you
But
are.
the cream is really thick usually, and
Yep.
so it's easier to put it on first, and the
Yep.
jam is quite soft and easily spread on top of the cream. If you put the
Right.
jam on and
Yep.
then try and mash the cream on, everything
Yep.
goes haywire. That's just
Right.
my
Okay.
my
All
experience.
right.
But people have different. You have different cream, different jam. Who knows what could happen?
To be honest, I don't care. It's all in my stomach anyway afterwards, so I don't really care which way it goes.
Correct attitude.
Yes, yes, yes. As long as they're yummy, I'm fine. I'm a big
Always
sucker
yummy.
for clotted cream. So I really love it. So it's just, one
Yeah,
of those
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Of course, it's got to be clotted cream. Couldn't be anything else.
Well, someone say that exactly cream before the jam. This side to the screen.
Cream. Thank you. Clearly, someone else of taste and discernment in the audience. Thank you very much. Yes.
Brilliant. Well, great stuff. And once again, just thank everybody for joining today's chat. And it's a pleasure sharing photography together. We're going to have someone special coming in next week. I'm still trying to organize the details, but I have invited and he has agreed. It's the CEO from Camera Intelligence. So the one who brought the AI camera that we talked about last week. He's going to be live here to next week to talk about photography and the future of photography in his eyes. So this should be an interesting talk to the with the gentleman who basically invented AI photography. Let's see what we can talk about and whether you share his enthusiasm. I certainly have a thing or two to say about that, and then I'm sure Rod, we're going to have some question about that. So it's going to be very interesting.
I better keep quiet. Yeah, I better keep quiet.
But it's going to be interesting. So if you want to join us next week, you're very welcome to. And the preliminary is going to be 3 p.m. Next Wednesday, same time. But I will update everything on social media, so you just stay tuned for that. So we're going to have some discussion on that one. So it's going to be interesting. I think everyone's going to enjoy that. So until next time, I guess we're going to say goodbye from here. And everyone have a lovely day. And don't forget to take more photographs. Remember, bokeh is not everything. Anyway, again, see you guys and see you next time. All right, bye for now.